Welcome to the Health and Wealth Power Hour, the podcast that provides you with the knowledge and insights you need to achieve physical, mental, and financial well-being. I'm your host, Allan, a business consultant who's passionate about helping people achieve a more balanced and healthier life. Each week, we'll deep dive into topics related to health and wealth, including retirement income planning, innovative healthcare solutions, alternative funded health plans, and specific actions individuals and business owners can take to gain control of their finances, have access to affordable quality health care, and achieve peace of mind. We'll also be joined by innovative experts who will share their knowledge and insights on prevalent topics. So, whether you're looking to grow your wealth or improve your health, you've come to the right place. Get ready to be informed, inspired, and empowered. Let's get started. All righty, gang. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Health and Wealth Power Hour. I am your host, Allan. Great to have you with us today. I know. You read the title and you're like, seriously? We're talking about weight loss. We're talking about nutrition and all that. Come on, Harlan. I don't want to. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to do those things. It's no fun. No, it ain't no fun. But you know what? When we talk about your health and wealth, there is no greater wealth than your health. And if you're not taking care of that health, it really don't make any difference how much money you have. There are lots of folks out there with all the money in the world that will tell you right now that they would give up almost everything to have their health back because of choices that they made throughout their life. That means that they do not have the quality of life today to even enjoy the wealth that they accumulated. Well, today we have a navigator with us, a health and lifestyle navigator, a health coach, a guru, as it were, for those of us that are 40 and above and that have had a very difficult time with that yo-yo, with motivation, with mindset, with all of the things that go into trying to keep that weight off or even caring if that weight is off. Welcome to the Health and Wealth Power Hour, Allan Miser. It is great to have you with us today, buddy.
I'm happy to be here, Allan.
So first thing that struck me about your story was it's almost like everyone else's. You had faced so many times when you were almost disgusted with yourself or where you had let yourself get. As an athlete, it was very striking to me that you just wanted to play a little volleyball and then realized you couldn't even do it. It was kicking your butt.
Yeah, I was close to calling an ambulance playing one game of volleyball, 6-on-6. So this is just take a step to the right, bump, take a step to the left, bump. You know, this was not anything that should have been strenuous. But I couldn't do it. And what was so sick about it was that I did everything right, you know, from the perspective of a career. I was a C-suite executive of a Fortune 500 company at the age of 39, the vice president. Okay. And I was like, so I made it, right? I did the thing. I worked my way up the corporate ladder and I'm now sitting in the top, you know, and I'm in board meetings and I'm doing all this stuff. But when I got out there, I realized I'm pathetic. This is terrible. I'm out of shape. I'm unfit. I'm unhealthy. And the word that came out of my mouth, and you can believe this if you want to, but I called myself a fat bastard. And I was not a good person anymore. I had all these toxic relationships. You know, I was really good at my job, but that was it. That's all I had going for me. And so, yeah, I had the money, I had the things. I didn't take a vacation for 3 years. And so I said, okay, I have to take a vacation. I work for a vacation company, so I need to take a vacation. I took a week off. I wanted to do this timeshare, and I was working in timeshare. I wasn't selling timeshare. I was in corporate office, but I walked into the timeshare and I just said, okay, where's the sales office? Because I knew if I went ahead and bought my week, I would go because I wasn't going to let that. And so I bought my week just so I'd go. And I saw volleyball on the schedule. And I'm like, this is awesome. The next day I'm out there, you know, ready to go. And I didn't make it. I hardly made it through one game. And then I'm sitting there thinking, okay, do I need to call an ambulance? And so it was just such a huge departure from who I thought I was to who I was now. You know, I was like, this is not who I'm supposed to be. Now, it was an all-inclusive timeshare. So even though I decided I was going to change, I still drank my ass off for the rest of the week because it was all paid for.
Right.
I'll start on Monday kind of thing. Well, no, and I did, but I failed. And so I'd lose weight, gain weight, lose weight, gain weight. And so I found myself 8 years later, worse than I was when I first started. Nothing was working for me. And so I remember my daughter called me and she said, Daddy, would you watch me do a CrossFit competition? She was so excited about CrossFit. She was a level 1 CrossFit coach. Would you watch me do a competition? I'm like, wait. I'm supposed to be a participant in my daughter's life, not a spectator. And I can't. I knew I couldn't go do that competition at that stage, but I was like, it hit me in the stomach. It's like, that's not who I'm supposed to be. So that was when I made the commitment. That's when I said, okay, this is not right. I did go watch her. So don't think I'm a bad dad and didn't go watch my daughter. I did go watch her, but that was kind of the thing that got me thinking, what is wrong with me? I've done tons of hard things. Why is this harder? Why is this so hard? And then I realized it's not any harder than the other hard things I did. I didn't make it to the C-suite at age 39 without doing some really, really hard things. And I had been in the U.S. military as an infantry soldier in a ranger unit. I did hard things. Why was this harder? And I said, well, it's not. The difference is me. When I commit to something, I go nuts. I mean, I go fanatical. And so every hard thing I ever did, I said, okay, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to do this. But I had not really done that with health and fitness. And so I said, okay, there are no excuses. There is no fail. And I can't say I burned all the boats, forced to fight, but I just said, there's no turning back. I'm fixing this, whatever it takes. And so I went out, I was saying, I'll try to find a coach. And I was like, well, I'm traveling 90% of the time for my job. And what a lot of people don't recognize, that stat means I'm home 1 weekend a month. You can't really work with a personal trainer 1 weekend a month and think you're going to get anywhere. So I said, okay, I can't do that. I started looking around online to see if I could find a coach that could coach me online. And there weren't any coaches doing general population online yet. I don't know why, but they weren't. There were some coaches doing other stuff, but not that. So I started looking for books and podcasts. There were no podcasts for people over 40. I've been trying for 8 years. I'm like, I break every time I try to do something normal. And so I can't do what everybody else is doing. I got to find my way. The books that I found, stretching and chair yoga. Well, that wasn't going to change anything. So I was like, I got to fix this. And so I went ahead and said, okay, the only way I can fix it is to become the trainer I need to hire. So I went out and got certified as a personal trainer. I did my corrective exercise, functional aging, fitness, nutrition to get the information I needed just to coach myself. I had no intention of being a health coach or fitness coach, not at all, but to coach myself. And so I started doing the things that I was learning. I started implementing those, and they worked. And they started working. And I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to become the man that I'm supposed to be. And so the commitment part has 2 parts. So the first one was the why. And the why was I didn't want to be a spectator. I wanted to be a participant. Now, since then, I've kind of dived into that statement a little deeper. And what I find is what I wanted my daughter to respect me. And I wanted the self-respect that would come from me being able to do things with her like that. So I did the crazy thing and I signed us up for a Tough Mudder. Now, a Tough Mudder is about a 12 to 13 mile run. It's done out there where you do the 4-wheeling and where you lose your trucks and have to have them pulled out with a Jeep and a winch. This is not easy terrain to be running around on. And then they just throw in 25 obstacles just to make it fun. Okay. So it's a pretty grueling day. It is. And now I didn't want to just do it. Like I said, I wanted to participate with my daughter. So this meant that the shape I needed to get in was to be able to stay with her. I didn't want to have to tell her, go on without me, I'll finish, or for her to want to feel like she needed to stop and wait for me. So I'm like, no, just go. I couldn't do that. I had to be ready to go. So I started training really, really hard, fanatical, obsessive. Now, I wouldn't recommend that to everybody, but for me and where I needed to be, that's what I had to do. And so after 11 months of this, I had lost 66 pounds of fat. I put on 11 pounds of muscle, and I went out there, did that Tough Mudder, and finished that race holding my daughter's hand.
That's awesome.
And I tell you, you probably, if you've been a parent, you know this, there's like magic moments that you'll just forever are just etched in your heart. So the first one was the day she was born. She was born OP, which means her face was up. So it's a form of breech, but not so bad. They had to use forceps, though, when they pull her out. And so she was a little distracted, and that meant she didn't do well on the aptitude test. So they put her over to the side. They wanted her to do another one. And I just put my hand out, and she reached out and grabbed my pinky, wrapped her little bitty fingers around my pinky. Okay, that's one of those magic moments, okay? Then there's finishing the Tough Mudder holding her hand. And then there's 2 years ago, walking her down the aisle. Now, I'm pretty sure if I didn't have that gut punch, her saying, Daddy, come watch me do this competition, I wouldn't have done the last two, because I don't know that I would have still been alive 2 years ago, because I was in really bad shape, really bad health. So when you're looking to change, you need the two things. You need a why, and you need a vision. What does this look like? And if you have those two things, you now have a commitment. And if you're like me, when I commit to something, it's 100%. I'm in. I'm done. So 8 years earlier, it had been a decision. But here I was making a commitment.
So there's a period of time, obviously when you were younger, you mentioned that you were an athlete.
Yes.
And so I obviously in good shape at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And in essence, your career or your focus became on something other than your health, right? Became on that, as it were, climbing a different kind of ladder, climbing that corporate ladder in this case. How did it all go awry there? Allan, as you think back on that, how did you let yourself get that? And I think it's a common thing. I'm asking this question because I think people sit there and they start thinking to themselves, how did I get here? Because there had to be that moment when you're trying to decide whether to call the ambulance or not, where you're thinking, how did I get here from where I was? And I know I was in good shape at this point to where I'm sitting here right now. And I'm still in a shape, but it's not the shape. But it's now I'm in a round shape, not in the shape I was before, right? Because round is a shape. You're still in a shape, different shape. Did you really delve into that and start thinking, where did this go awry? How did I let this happen?
Well, I think I got singular focused. I had one objective, and I just focused on that one thing, and I didn't really pay attention to anything else. And so over time, my relationships with my family got worse. I was in a very toxic relationship with a girlfriend that it was just, convenient, let her stick around. I wasn't eating right, drinking all the time, because when you travel a lot, you go to your hotel, and if it's not a business meeting that you're going to with or have food and drinks, well, you come back to your hotel. You've been working a 12-hour day. You're like tired. Like, I'm not going to go somewhere else and get dinner. I'll just go over here to a hotel bar. So I'm like, you sit down. What do you have to drink? I have a beer. Have a beer, order a meal, order another beer, be eating the meal, order another beer, maybe a fourth to take up to my room. Okay. And I can tell you, if you eat at a bar every night when you're traveling, because again, 90% travel, that's 27 nights out of the month. I'm doing this. And it's a lot. It's a lot. And then, I'm not paying attention to the overall fitness. I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting for 12 hours a day.
Right.
The most strenuous thing I do is stand up from my chair and walk to the bathroom. That's not much of a workout. And so, it's just my focus. I was totally focused on one thing. And so it's been a turnaround in my head that I now think whenever I'm going to make a big decision, I don't just think about the financial outcome of that decision. So a perfect example would be this. I started training people online, and I started the podcast, and I was doing that. This was a sideline. I'm just going to do this on the side because it brings me joy to help people. I'm going to do this on the side, have the podcast, and then do some coaching, a little bit of coaching, not a lot. And then after 5 years, I'll have built a name for myself. When I retire, I've got kind of this second gig thing I'm doing. Well, the company I was working for laid me off 2 years into my 5-year plan. Okay. And so when they laid me off, I was thinking, this is great. Most people think the layoff is terrible, but I was like, okay, this is a pivot point in my life. I can make a decision here. And the two decisions were, do I go get another job? Which I knew, because of the way stock vesting and everything worked at my level, was I'd have to be with that company for at least 3 years to start vesting any stock. And then, years after that. So my 5-year clock would at least restart to 5 and probably 6 or 7. So my age 55 retirement would now be somewhere around 59 to 62. And I'm like, okay, do I really want to do that? Or do I want to think about my health and fitness a little bit more and focus on that and focus on me? And I decided me. I'm like, I'm not worth it. I mean, it's not worth it for me to go get that job again. So I walked away from a very high-paying job. I could have gone and gotten another one of those very high-paying jobs. I was very good at what I do. So I would have had no problem finding another job, but I didn't want to. And so I decided not to. And I told my wife, I said, I don't want to go back. So I got to figure this thing out. And that's when I sat down and said, okay, I had Cobra for 6 months on insurance. It was $1,600 a month. And then when the Cobra ran out, I got a quote. It was $2,000 a month. And so my wife went to work. I said, I just need you to go to work for about a year. I said, I don't care if they even pay you. I just want insurance. Okay. So she went to work. Here's the funny thing. I go cooking for her. So I'm cooking all of her meals. So the first 2 weeks she's at that job, she loses 10 pounds. Just me cooking her meals, because now she was eating whole food and taking care of herself, because I made sure I was cooking everything she ate. But she lost 10 pounds the first 2 weeks she was in that job. But she got her insurance, and I sat down and I wrote my book, The Wellness Roadmap. And so this was just sort of me writing out what I did, how I did this, as kind of a roadmap to help someone else behind me come through and figure this all out. Now, I've learned a ton since then. So I talk about a lot of different things that I didn't have in the book, and I've learned that I was not right about everything, despite thinking maybe I was. There are other things out there I don't know, and the more I learn, the more I know I don't know everything, which I think is supposed to be called wisdom, but I'm not going to go that far for myself. And so yeah, it's like I started training now. So fast forward another year, and so now we're running into 2018. And I've got the big house that I paid for, but I'm paying a whole bunch of money in taxes and insurance. And, my wife says she really doesn't want to keep working. So we're looking at the medical insurance. And I'm like, this is ridiculous that I have to have nearly $100,000 just to live in a paid for house and pay for my own health insurance. Like, this is insane. So we started looking around. And it's like, so, okay, what's the decision? And I did not want to go back to corporate. I said, so what's going to be better for me? Again, not money-wise or anything else. And we said, well, how about we just sell everything and move to another country? And so we did. We sold everything and we moved down to Panama. And I live on an island in the Caribbean off the coast of Panama that does not get hurricanes. So, okay. Yeah, so plenty of sunshine, beautiful weather all year round, and I love it here. And so, again, making the decisions based on what's going to bring you joy, what's going to make you more whole, and make you more fit, make you healthier. When you start doing that, everything else in your life falls in place.
Very cool. Now that is a big decision, right? I mean, that is really saying I'm going all in on this thing, because I'm getting out of Dodge too.
Yeah, it was a one-way ticket, baby. I
think one of the misconceptions that a lot of us have. I'm 57, and I'm not in the greatest shape. I think I could play volleyball. Maybe I couldn't. Maybe I'm fooling myself there. I can still do a few things. I've got a few crazy, creaky things, and maybe my shoulder wouldn't hold up as well because I got some stuff going on there, but neither here nor there. But I think one of the things that gets us, and I've heard people literally say this, I don't work out like I used to because, man, I just can't work out like I used to. And it's because we expect ourselves at 50 to be able to what we could do at 30. And when we can't, we just give up and say, well, I had my day in the sun and now it just is what it is. I can't do anything about it. So woe is me. Pass the cheeseburger.
Yeah, you pulled it. That as I went through, because I looked back at my change, and I've worked with thousands of people over the last 9 years, and so I'm like, I started to see common traits or common mindsets in people, and so as I kind of went through it, I actually identified 5 of them, that there are things that just stop us. They stop us in our tracks. The one you just described, I called the windshield. Okay. So the windshield is someone who's looking in the rearview mirror at who they used to be. And it cuts both ways. If you're like in the past, if you were an athlete, you're like, well, that's who I should be. And so you get mad that you're not able to do those things. And so you don't. But you still look out of that, instead of turning around and realizing the seat you're sitting in and the windshield is the go forward. That's where you need to go. Okay, we don't do that. We just get stuck on who that was. It might have also been that you were the big boned kid in school that people, laughed at. You got picked last for sports. You're still looking in the rearview mirror saying, I'm not good at this stuff, so I'm not going to do it. Okay, that's a windshield. I started out, when I first started my journey, though, I started out as what I call a co-pilot. Now, a co-pilot is a person who puts everybody else's priorities before themselves. So it's very common in women that are mothers. I got to take the kids to all the sporting events. I got to cook their meals, do this thing. And then they just don't have an ounce of energy for themselves. And they're like, I'm stuck, Another one that I had, so I didn't have the windshield. I had the co-pilot because my job, my 100%, putting in 12 to 16 hour days. When would I work out? And so it's go to the bar, have a meal, drink some beers, go to sleep, rinse and repeat. And so that was me. Then I was the windshield. I used to be an athlete. Why can't I do this exercise? At one point I bought the Insanity workout from Beachbody with Shaun T. And I was watching the video. It's like they had infomercials. I think you guys still have those in the States. But anyway, I was watching this infomercial, and there's Shaun T. He's really cool. He's super ripped, and he's got 6 people in the background. They're all smiling. They're all working hard. It looks great. I'm like, that's perfect because I don't need equipment. I could do that on the road, wherever, even in my hotel room. And so I buy the set. I rip the DVDs to my iPad, and I'm like ready to go. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting ready to go on this trip on Tuesday. So Sunday, I'm like, I'm going to do the benchmark workout. Just the benchmark. This is not even really a workout. It's just a test. So you can see how well you're doing after. So I do the test, and the next morning I woke up, and it was like guys that just sat there and beat me with a baseball bat all night long. I was so sore. I couldn't move. It hurt to reach over for my phone because I had to call off work because I just couldn't get out of that bed. And so, yeah, I was definitely a windshield person, and not realizing where I was sitting and how I needed to move forward. Okay, so that's a windshield. There's also people that are pedals. I was never really a pedals, but a pedal person is someone who tries something new for a week and then decides it's not working. I'm going to try this new diet, and they start doing it and they look at the scale. It's like, it's not going down. It's not working. So they'll go 1 or 2 weeks, maybe 3, and then they quit. They just put the brake on, and then maybe they're looking for something else. Okay. The magic button. Well, that doesn't exist. So with a pedals person, they have to realize that to get results, you got to go a little further, a little longer. So give it 8 weeks, give it 6 weeks. And if it's a proper thing to do, like you might say, I want to do the paleo diet or the Mediterranean diet, well, do it and promise yourself you're going to do it for 8 weeks. Then you'll see the results. You may not see it in the first 1 or 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So give it enough time. And every time you feel like you want to hit that break, don't. Force yourself to keep driving forward. Promise yourself you're going to do it a certain amount of time, and you'll get further. One of the other ones I have what I call tires. Now, a tires person needs traction. You live in a place where it gets cold and icy. You're going uphill. They tell you, once you have traction, don't go faster, don't go slower, just keep going. Because if you start to go too fast, you hit the brakes, you're going to slide down the hill and probably into the ditch. Okay? So a tires person needs traction. So where they get excited is when they sit back and say, okay, I need to have a streak. So the games that you can play on your phone or on your watch where they're seeing the circles, they want to get their circles every day. That's someone who, when they see that stuff, they get really excited, okay? That's a tires person. So set yourself up to have some visual cue that you're doing the thing, and you'll be more driven to do the thing. Now, after I got past those, because you do have to go through these in order, I got past them, I realized there's another one called the Atlas. Now, this Atlas is the paper atlas we used to have when we were kids, when we were younger, the maps. And they don't hardly sell them. You can buy one on Amazon, but you won't find one at a service station anymore. I tried. They don't have them. So you got to go to Amazon if you want one. They still print them. But we used to, our parents used to sit there with a red felt marker and mark our path for our long summer trips, okay? Everybody has that experience. It's so weird. Everybody has the experience of their parents writing the felt. I now know as a parent that the reason you do that is so the kid doesn't say, are we there yet? You just give them the damn atlas and say, look where we are on the map. And then we are here. There. Right? I don't want that question anymore. But anyway, an atlas needs to see the outcome. They need that big vision. So when I signed up for the Tough Mudder, that was something that really motivated me to work hard enough anyway, to get the results, to get where I needed to be. So an atlas is someone who's high challenge. So that you might hear the term type A person. The type A person is typically an atlas when they're going. So there's these 5 different mindsets, and what's important is that you tackle them in order. So I've got a quiz on my website, 40plusfitness.com/quiz. You take that quiz, it will tell you what your primary type is right now. So I had to get past the co-pilot and realized that my priorities were my priorities, and I needed to put them before some of the business priorities or kid priorities or whatever it is. Then I realized I have to realize where I'm sitting, because I'm a windshield person, so I can't do what I did when I was 29 years old. And then after I got past that one, I had to get traction. I had needed some way to just get consistent and stay consistent, and seeing it was a big part of it, marking it on a calendar. Marking my, having my little book and putting my workouts in there every day. I needed that. And then finally the Atlas, and that's when I told my daughter, hey, let's do this Tough Mudder. Because I knew that I bought the airline tickets, got the hotel room, bought the seat, the tickets to do the event. So I was committed. Just like I said, I did the commitment. When I bought the timeshare, I'm going to take a vacation every year. It was that same kind of thing. If this is in front of me, I'm going to use it. And so this thing, I put money in, I was invested, and I did the work to make sure I was ready. So your mindset drives a lot of the self-sabotage stuff that happens. And so if you can kind of recognize why you're sabotaging, you can figure out ways to stop it.
So what has been your experience at this point? I mean, you're doing your coaching online, so you're talking to people in the States, you're talking to people other places, right? Obviously not just a little island you live on, but all over the place.
Right.
What has been your experience in the last couple years, in particular in the last year, with people using, I'm just going to say what I feel it is, but people using the crutch of these GLP-1s, of Wegovy and Zepbound and, Ozempic. Ozempic, I know, can be used for diabetes and stuff too. There's a proper place for these medications, but more and more people are using them for weight loss, are asking for them for weight loss, and not wanting to do some of these other things because we love an easy button. Man, an easy button rocks. And that's what I look at it as. But how have you been facing that? And what has been really the impact in your whole world? Because I know you probably talk to other folks that do what you do as well. What have y'all seen, and how are y'all addressing it?
Okay. I would call those drugs frailty drugs. If you want to be frail, then take those drugs because that's what they do.
Yes,
Okay.
I agree. I agree. No, I mean, it's proven fact they're taking away muscle too, right?
If you're losing muscle, you're losing bone density. Yeah, you're losing bone density. You're losing muscle. You're becoming frail. Okay. I'm going to tell you a story. Okay. My grandfather loved golf. I mean, he loved golf more than people. Like really. He got divorced, but he was a salesman. And back then, that's what salesmen would do when they were doing bulk sales to companies. They'd go out and play golf with their guys, and then they'd cross a deal. And so he played golf every day, and he was really good at it until he was 80. And I was visiting him. I traveled there for Thanksgiving, and I'd go visit family, and so I'd go see him. And usually I'd have lunch with him, and then he'd go to the course and play. So we'd go to the country club to have lunch, and then he'd ride off on the cart to play some golf. So this one time I was there, I come in and we have lunch, and then he doesn't drive off. So I'm like, what's going on, Grandpa? He's like, I said, aren't you going to play golf with the guys? He's like, no, I can't play anymore. I'm like, what's going on? He said, I don't have the strength and I don't have the balance. I can't swing the clubs. Now, for a lot of people to say, well, he's 80, put the clubs away. It's, that's a kid's game or a young adult's game anyway, or maybe an old adult's club. But he lived until he was 95. So the last 15 years of his life, he didn't have the physical capacity to play the game he loved the most. Now you flash forward and he's 90. He's living in his own apartment, but it's in an assisted care area. So there's a desk that he can call to and if he needs help, but he can't get from his chair to the bathroom. So he realizes he has to go. He's not going to make it. Okay. And so he has to call down to the desk to help him. And because he had this problem, he didn't want anybody visiting him. So I didn't get to see him the last 5 years of his life because he wouldn't see anybody. Now, I want to be able to wipe my own ass when I'm 105. And what that's going to require is some stamina, some balance, some strength, and a little bit of mobility so I can twist and do the paperwork.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if you're taking these drugs to lose weight, that's fine. If it helps you lose some weight, but if you're not doing the other things, if this is just an easy button and you're not doing resistance training and getting adequate protein, which is hard when you're not eating anything, but you need the protein, you need to be doing resistance training, and you need to recognize that, yes, you are hurting yourself for the sake of losing the fat when it's not really all that hard to lose the fat if you just make a few small minor changes to your lifestyle. But these are folks that don't want to change their lifestyle.
Right.
It's the same way as you see the people who go to bariatric surgery. They're 300 pounds. The doctors, they were 330 and the doctor says, if you're over 300, I'm not going to do it. They get down to 300 and then the doctor does a surgery. And 4 years later, they're back up to 330, because they didn't change anything. So not changing anything and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. Not the kind with Sean T, but insanity nonetheless. And so it's just one of those, it's a crutch and it's a tool and it could be used in the right way. But one of the main problems is that the doctors that are prescribing this, there's fine print that says you should start doing this training and start eating better, but no one's going to do it. No one's doing it. Most people aren't doing it.
Right. The people that are actually getting the best results are doing it.
Yeah.
But it's such a few amount. The percentage is so low, but there's a lot of people losing a lot of weight.
They are. 15% of your body weight is significant for most people. And so, yeah, it's, I can't say it doesn't work. You will weigh less, but you will have less muscle and you will have less bone. And over the age of 35, that's not a bet I would take because you're already on sarcopenia. You're already losing those things. Yeah. And now all you're really doing is pouring gas on that and not doing anything to keep it from happening. So in my mind, this is a frailty drug. You just want to be frail.
And I can tell you, you talk about that age. I mean, I can tell you from the people that call me wanting a health plan that's going to cover it or wanting to talk to me about these things, because that's what we do is we do health plans and such. They're not under 35. I can tell you that right now. They're most likely not under 50. I mean, the most of the people that we hear from are over 50, probably even greater percentage over 60 that are, heard about this or watched the commercial. Thanks a lot, for allowing us to have commercials about this crap in the States. And they see the commercial and then they're calling me saying, hey, I tried to get this with my plan and they don't cover. Can you get me a plan where I can get my, my Wegovy, where I can get my GLP-1? I'm like, you don't even understand what this is. You saw the commercial and now you want this without anything else. They just think that that's going to be this easy button, this, as you said earlier, this magic pill that's going to change everything for them. And they're not prepared. Their mindset isn't right. They're not in any way, shape, or form committed to it, quite honestly, because what we see is even people that do it, there's such a low percentage of people that keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the points of this, because what it's doing is effectively telling you to stop eating, just effectively starve yourself. And so you can do it physically. It works until you stop taking it. And then your hunger is going to come back. And if you haven't changed the way you eat, you're going to go back to eating what you're eating. You're going to start gaining the weight back. And, if I was a physician and someone came to me and said they want this and I was willing to go ahead and start prescribing it, it'd be pretty simple. I'd say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write you a prescription for this. Okay. You're going to be able to get 2. But I want you to come back with a membership to a gym and a contract with a personal trainer that you need to see 3 times per week. And then I'm going to have I'm going to tell that personal trainer that I want them to email me each week, whether you did it or not, whether you showed and did the work or not. If you're not doing the work with the personal trainer, I'm not going to prescribe it anymore, because you're not serious about this. Yeah, that's me. That's just me and my ethics. But doctors do what doctors do, and they know that their lifestyle changes are not going to typically happen. I remember reading a study. There's a Harvard doctor did a study on different diets, and he said, yeah, the keto diet is the best way to lose weight. He said, but nobody can stick to it, so it doesn't matter. You should just go ahead and eat this other way. And I'm like, wait, the study said it worked, and now you're just telling people you're not going to do it, so I'm not even going to say your way won, because this way won, because you're not going to stick with it. That's the mindset of a lot of doctors, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong. Doctors will tell you, if you're overweight, your doctor has told you 100 times, you need to increase your exercise and you need to decrease your food intake. And they tell you that every time. They just don't put you in touch with someone that will make that happen.
Yeah. No, there's this quote from the movie, The Ranch, that I always like. The one of the main characters goes to see a doctor and she tells him, I need you to stop eating steak. And he's like, no go, I'm going to eat steak. I'm going to eat steak. And she goes, okay, well, I need you to cut back on your whiskey. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that either. I'm going to drink my whiskey. And she goes, well, what are you going to do about your stress? He goes, eat steak and drink whiskey. I mean,
that's reality. Yeah. But that's reality.
That's reality, right? That's what I was going to say. But that's what people think. They're like, well, why don't you make the change? Well, because I like steak and whiskey. I mean,
and I think that's part of it. People won't change until the value of what they get from that change is higher than the cost of the change.
Right.
So the person that loves whiskey doesn't want to give up whiskey to lose weight. And they don't actually have to. They just probably need to cut back a little bit. A person that loves steak doesn't have to cut out steak to get their blood lipids where they need them. Just maybe cut it back a little bit. There's a path for each person, and it doesn't mean abstinence. It doesn't mean 100% never ever again. You just have to know where's the line that I can tread and get the results that I want.
I want to go back to what I talked about earlier that you said is the windshield, looking back. But is it true that the exercises and the things that you should be doing at 50 or 60 are not the same as what you were doing at 30, or does it not change? I mean, if we're looking back on things and we're saying, I can't do that anymore, that's real. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
But should you be trying to do those things anyway, or is there a different set of exercises and things that you should be doing as you get older because of the age of your body? I mean, I have a couple of bad shoulders. They do prevent me from doing the things that I want to do, but both of my rotator cuffs full disclosure, both of my rotators are tore up so bad that they cannot be repaired. I need to have full shoulder replacements in both of them, but the doctor recommended not having them.
Yeah.
The reason is because, as he said, and it's the first time I've heard this in a long time, I'm too young. Like, what? Cool, man. I'm too young. Yeah. But it's because shoulders wear out quicker than other replacement joints. Didn't know that either. Because they're used so much more, typically 10 to 12 years, would need to be replaced. So he said, in my case, he recommended 5 years from now, we look at it again and maybe do it then, because as you get older, maybe I'd get 15 or 20 out of it, and maybe I'd never have to have it done again. But if I did it now, the likelihood of having to have the same surgery in 10 years was very high. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. He gave me a couple of shots. I'll probably get a shot every year to be able to have some mobility and stuff there. But it certainly keeps me from doing some of the same exercises that I could do when I was younger and didn't have this problem. So how do we address things like that? I mean, I'm not the only one. And then there's the other part of, if you're tremendously out of shape, you can't decide you're going to run a marathon right away. How do you even get started to get back to where you can do more things?
Okay. There's a lot to unpack there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the short answer is yes. Okay. Just kidding. So here's the deal.
Moving on.
So we absolutely should be doing the things that we were doing if we can do them. Okay. So that's the short answer. So lifting weights, running, doing those types of things. That's what our body was designed to do. Our body was designed to move. Now, here's the really cool thing. The human body is the best gift you've ever received in your entire life. And the reason I say that is it is a machine that we live in that can heal itself and improve itself if we give it what it needs. Okay? That is amazing. I'm so grateful for the body that I'm in and what it's capable of doing. And what doesn't really matter your age, that capability never goes away. It's always there. We give our body what it needs. It will heal in most cases, and it will improve. Okay. Now, as we get older, there are two basic things that are happening. We're getting deconditioned. So yes, it's harder. We can't do the marathon that we could do before. We can't lift what we used to lift. We can't move as much. I couldn't play volleyball the way I did when I was younger. That was deconditioning. Okay. We can work on conditioning and get back to a state where we can do some of those things again. Okay. My grandfather, I know 100%, if he had started training with a trainer, even when he was 80, he probably could have got back on the golf course.
Yeah.
Okay. But he didn't. Okay. So he didn't. I know if he started training, he would not have had the trouble he had getting to the bathroom if he did, but he didn't. So he didn't. Okay. So deconditioning, conditioning is an issue. Okay. So I had a client, and she was 53 years old. She told me that she gets winded walking to her car in the carport. Okay. I said, okay. That's a start. Okay. So I said, what I want you to do tomorrow is when you walk to your car, I want you to do one lap around your car. Okay. Will you do that? She said, yeah. So she walked to the car. She's a little winded. She did one lap around the car, and then she got in the car and went to work. So I asked her how it went. She said it was hard. It was really hard. I was really winded. I said, okay, but tomorrow do it again. She did it again. And she did it again. After a couple of days, she said, okay, I can do one lap around the car. Okay. Like, okay, now do two laps around the car. Okay. This simple thing with just gentle nudges a little bit further, one more lap around the car, within a few weeks, she was able to walk for 30 minutes around her neighborhood. Okay, so the body will respond. The body will get better if you give it what it needs, okay? So we started working on conditioning, and that got her better. Now, was she ever going to run a marathon? I don't know. But, again, you start from where you are. You're sitting in that seat. That's where you are. If it's just one more lap around the car, it's just one more lap around the car. Now, the other element that you brought up is injuries. We did some stupid stuff. Thank God the internet wasn't around.
No one had a camera phone back then. So there is plausible liability on everything that happened.
Everything stupid we did. Okay. But many of us came away with some injuries as a result. Okay. I also tore my rotator cuff, and I know it was from years of push-ups and this and that and tussling and football and everything else. And so I was working out, and I told a trainer, I hired a trainer when I was 51. I said, I want to get as strong as I can possibly get because I'm going to go do this Spartan race. And he's like, okay. So I started training with him, and I got really freaking strong. I mean, I was about as strong at 51 as I was in high school as a football player. I got really good and strong. And then one day I tore a rotator cuff, like completely popped off. Okay. Got the surgery, went through the rehab, got myself back. So there are some limits, some physical limits. If we've got some injuries or, like what I had was apparently a calcium thing that was on the bone. And so every time I moved my arm a certain way, it was rubbing against that muscle and kind of shaving it. And so there was a point where it just was thin enough, and the weight I had over my head was pushing over my head was heavy enough that it just went pop. Okay. So there are some physical limitations that we're going to deal with, typically around injuries that we, got when we were younger. So someone tears up their knee in high school, maybe has a couple surgeries, their knee's probably going to bother them when they're older.
Right.
Okay. If we're not eating well and we have all of this inflammation, our joints are going to hurt. Now, not eating that crap, your inflammation should go down, but you might notice that the pain doesn't completely go away because over time that inflammation has caused some damage, and so it hurts. So there are going to be some physical limitations that you just have to work around. And typically with clients I'm working with, they'll have something, and they'll tell me, okay, I've got a problem with my left foot, plantar fasciitis. I've got this with my shoulder, and that. Like, okay, well, we work on some of that, and some of that we're just not going to do some things because we don't want to hurt you. So you have to know where you are. And then as you move forward with all of this, the way I like to think about it is gentle nudges. There's no extremes. So like I said, if you get winded walking to your car, just do a lap around it. I didn't tell her to walk back and forth to her car 4 times. I said, just another lap. I'm looking at weights and trying to do resistance training. I start out, it's like, okay, I'm using the 5-pound dumbbells. And it's like, I'm not going to immediately jump up to the 10s. I'm going to say, okay, do they have any 7s or 8s? And try that. So, people think, this is just 3 pounds. Well, that's 60%. To go from 5 to 8 is a 60% increase. So that's pretty significant. But it's a law of small numbers when you have little bars and little dumbbells and stuff. But when you get bigger, it's that number percentage goes down. So typically, other than when you're dealing with small numbers, you never want to go up in the weights more than maybe 10% per week. If you're going to do anything that's stamina-wise, you never want to go up more than 10% per week. And so if you just set those kind of guidelines on yourself and you just listen to your body, because that's the other thing. The human body is really good at telling us what it doesn't like. Okay, if we listen, it'd tell us. It's like, look, I didn't like that. So when I was laying in that bed and I could barely reach over and grab my phone, my body was screaming at me. I don't like that. Okay.
But I think it's our nature. I know it is mine. This is one of the things that I've always struggled with is whenever I decided that I was going to get back into doing XYZ, whatever that is, lifting weights, walking, running. I was a distance runner whenever I was in high school, played football too, but I was also a distance runner. It's one of the funny things I think about now, and it just boggles my mind. that to prepare for the mile, because that's what I ran as the mile, we would run 16 miles a day. Because if you run 16 miles every day, running the mile, that's no big deal. When you got to the meet, run a mile, no problem. I can't even imagine the fact that I used to run 16 miles a day, right? I mean, that's just like, it's so far in my past, it's hard for me to imagine that. But I feel like I should be able to go outside right now and run a mile with no problem. I promise you, I cannot.
Okay. But I would tell you not to try to walk that mile. What I would say is,
I agree. I'm just saying, I think that's tough for us. It's tough for us. It's that rear view. That's what I'm really saying. It's very difficult. And then when I can't do it, I'm so distraught that I just say, pass the cheeseburger diet. Here I go again. I think that's one of the things that everyone struggles with, Allan, is I should be able to do this. I can't do this. I'm a loser. I'm just going to go sit on my couch and have a cold beer and eat a cheeseburger and say, woe is me.
Yeah. Well, what you're talking about there is actually a problem with motivation. Okay. You get demotivated. We get demotivated very easy. And so, because a lot of us think motivation is like this magic fairy dust that floats around the air and shows up, hopefully when we need it, right? And it almost never does, especially if we do something and we feel distraught or we feel demotivated. Motivation just goes away. It's like, oh, it's not even there anymore. So what a lot of people don't understand about motivation is not something you get. Motivation is something you earn. And that might sound a little backwards when I say it that way, but hear me out. So there are two types of motivation, okay? There's extrinsic motivation, is outside of you, and there's intrinsic motivation, that's inside of you, okay? On the extrinsic, we're talking about accountability, okay? So someone who's really struggling with this situation, or that I try and I fail, or this is too hard and I don't like it, or this hurt and I don't want to, the best and easiest way is to start with accountability. It's the easiest to get. And there's two layers to both of these, and it's a leader layer and then the social layer. So the leader layer, that's me. It's a coach. Hire a coach or a personal trainer that understands you, understands what you should be capable of, and helps you put together a program that makes sense for you. They're also going to hold you accountable to do the work. So with that accountability from your coach, or, could be your boss at work, but either way, there's someone there that expects to see the work get done, and you're the one to do it. So you do it because you're being held accountable. At the social layer of accountability is where we talk about groups and peers. Now, a lot of people think of peer pressure and think that's a bad thing. Well, it's only a bad thing if you're surrounded by bad peers.
Yeah. Right.
If you surround yourself with good people like Jim Rohn told us to, then you're going to be a lot better for it, and they're going to hold you accountable. So this could be where you join a running club. This could be where you join a spin class, a water aerobics class. It can even be some of the online groups of just people that are there to support each other. Okay. So that's a level of accountability. I know, like, when I would go work out at the gym at 5 o'clock, it's the same people in there that hour every morning. So I know the guys. I didn't know their names. I had to give them names. Like, that's elliptical girl and that's bicep guy, and but I knew they were there. And so in this general sense, I knew if I didn't show up, there were times like when I was doing like CrossFit that those folks knew me, and they would probably text me to see if I was okay because I wasn't there. So, you get the groups around you, the peers that are going to help you do the right thing. They can hold you accountable. So accountability is actually pretty easy to get. You hire the coach, you join the groups. Okay. But it's kind of fleeting. It's not permanent. So like if you said, okay, well, I'm going to start walking with my brother or sister, that's great. So the two of you get out there walking, then she turns her ankle and she can't walk. And I don't know how many times someone has told me my walking partner hurt herself and she can't come, so I can't do it. And I ask, is it a dangerous place to walk? No. I said, so why can't you do it? Well, because they're not doing it. Okay, that makes no sense, but I understand it because it's accountability. The accountability is not there, so they're just not going to do it. Okay, it's a built-in excuse. So accountability is good to get started, but it's never going to be permanent. You're not going to hire the coach and keep them forever. You're not going to join a group and always be a part of that group or walk with the people you're going to walk with. But you get the accountability that gets you started, and that's a big, big thing. So right now you can't run a mile, but if you got some accountability in your life, you would start working on getting there. Now, over on the intrinsic side, now we're talking about self-efficacy. And this is where things get really, really good because self-efficacy is strong. So on the leader level, that's you, CEO of your health, CEO of your fitness, owner of the body, okay? And so you can make some management decisions for yourself that make this easier, okay? So you put it on your schedule. I'm going to walk for 30 minutes every afternoon during the week, during the weekdays. So that's what you do. You get home from work, you put on your walker, your walking shoes, some comfortable clothes, and you go for a 30-minute walk. A little bit later now, you might go ahead and toss in a jog here and there. I'll go to the fence post or I'll go to the stop sign. You do a little bit more and a little bit more. Okay, that's self-efficacy is going to make that happen. So you put it on your schedule. I'll tell you a story. I wanted to go to the gym at work, and I wanted to do it during my lunch hour. And so I was planning that. I lived about an hour away from the office, so I had to pack my gym bag and have it with me, so I would go. Sometimes I would forget a pair of socks, and sometimes shorts and a shirt. One time it was one shoe, and I'm like, how did I only pack one shoe? How did I not pack both shoes? And I knew at that point that this was me self-sabotaging. This was not an accident. I couldn't prove why I did it or how I did it, but I knew something was just fundamentally wrong with the process and it needed to be fixed. So I came out that day, I printed a list of everything that was supposed to be in that bag and I laminated it and I had it in my gym bag. And so every night I'd pull that out, put it on the bed, and I'd make sure every single thing from top to bottom was in the bag. And I'd take the bag and put it by the door. So I would literally have to trip over it going out to my truck in the morning. Okay. That is a process, right? That process made sure I had a packed bag in my office every day. And I started going to the gym more consistently. So when you're in self-management, you're thinking about ways to make things easier that you want to do or need to do, and things that you don't want to do are harder. So if I say, okay, well, I'm doing all this midnight snacking on these little Debbies, and I don't want to do that, well, get the little Debbies out of your house. Put friction there. If I want little Debbies, now I got to drive to the Albertsons and get some, right? Or the HEB, probably HEB for me. Okay, I got to drive to the HEB to get those little Debbies, and I'm just not going to do that. Okay, so I put some friction in there, make it harder for me to do things I don't want to do and easier to do the things I do want to do. Okay, and then what happens with self-efficacy then at that manager level is down now at the social level, you start to form habits and values. Okay, so I told you a story. You start walking for 30 minutes each day, and then you start adding a little jog. And then you're saying, hey, I think I might want to do this 5K. Someone at work's talking about it. So yeah, let's go do a 5K. And now you're buying better shoes and you're, buying the kit and the stuff, and you consider yourself a runner. And so what do runners do? Runners run. So now your whole identity is built around this. So as soon as you clock out at work and you get home, you just go for a run. And in fact, most runners get upset if they can't go for a run. If they hurt themselves or if the weather's just and making it impossible, they get upset. It's like, I'm a runner. I'm supposed to run. So when you get to that point where you identify as the person that's healthy and fit, you just do the thing. You don't even think about it. So motivation becomes unlimited within the realm of your identity. So you start over with accountability, you start working on self-efficacy and self-management, and then you identify as that person. And the people who are most successful at all this, they keep themselves in all four quadrants. They typically have coaches that are helping them with various aspects of what they want to do. They are part of groups all the time, like run clubs and everything else. They're over here looking for ways to make it easier to do the things they want to do. They're thinking it through to say, okay, I want to make this fun. I want to make this easy. So like me as an Atlas, as a self-manager, okay, what's the next big goal? What's the next big thing? I got to have something in front of me. So knowing that self-awareness and saying, this is going to make me work harder. This is going to make me better. And just doing those things, then I get down to identity, and this is who I am. I'm the father who can run a Tough Mudder with his CrossFit daughter. That's who I am. I'm a guy who can wipe his own ass at 105. I can open my own damn pickle jars, and I'm going to be independent for as long as I can be. I'm going to do the things I enjoy doing for as long as I can, and I'm going to do the training necessary to make that happen.
So this obviously has become your passion. Without a doubt, it's become your passion. As you said, you said earlier you didn't burn the ships, but I got news for you, Allan. You burned the ships, brother. You moved to an island, and so you burned the ships. You might not know what you did, but you did. You burned them ships. Might have took you a little longer to burn them, but I'm pretty sure you have. Oh, and so there's a couple of different things that you focus on outside of your coaching. One of those is your podcast, the 40 Plus Fitness podcast. Talk a little bit about that, because it wraps in around this, but it gives people another place to hear you talk about these different things. Obviously, you're going to reach a certain audience, maybe that hasn't heard of your podcast just by listening to this, but when they want to hear more, I think that would be a good place to start. So talk a little bit about that podcast and some of the different subjects y'all touch on there.
Well, like I said, when I first started down this path, I was looking for answers. Surely somebody knows how to do this. I mean, come on. Whole baby boomer generation just went through their 40s and nobody thought we are broke. It's just insane. And I'm like, I'm a Gen X, and I'm like, I can't believe that huge generation of people just went right through this age and they're struggling and nobody's even talking about it. Like, not even talking about it. It was different. When you're over 40, it's different. And then so I figured it all out. And I was like, and still no one was doing it. This was a year later. I'm like, there's still no one talking about this thing. This is so weird. So I said, well, if no one's going to talk about it, I'm at least going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it. And so I started looking out. There were no podcasts, nothing. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start the 40 Plus Fitness podcast. And so I started the podcast, and initially I was a little overambitious. I was doing episodes every weekday, 5 days a week, trying to keep them to 15 minutes. Doing a podcast, that's insane.
That's crazy.
Especially when I started trying to do interviews, and you're trying to keep someone to just talk for 50. We're only going to be on here for 15 minutes. And for some people, that was a little hard. And so I was like, okay, this is getting a little stressful. Plus I still have my full-time job. So I was like, okay, this is just a little too much. So I'm like, I guess I'll take it down to 3 per week, and I'll kind of lighten up on a time. It'll be what it's going to be, So I changed it up a little bit after I'd been doing it for, I think I'd done it for maybe 12 weeks like that way. And then I started just 3 per week. And then I said, I want to do it 1 per week and maybe some bonuses and episodes here and there. And I did that. And a strange thing happens in podcasting is what I found is more is not better. Better is better. And so when I went down to just said, I'm only going to do 1 per week. I'm going to focus a lot more attention on it. I'm going to make those episodes better from a content perspective, from everything. And the thing is, I realize now the behavior thing is someone comes onto their podcast catcher and they haven't been listening for a week or two. Well, when I first started, they'd come in, there'd be 10 episodes sitting there, 5 episodes or so. So they're just going to pick the one they want to hear, and then they're not going to listen to the rest of them. So my downloads per episode went way up because I was only doing it once per week. I figured that's my sweet spot. I enjoy that. Now, a couple things I do very different with the podcast is if I have an author on, I read their book, cover to cover, and then I ask questions. I ask questions from the book. Say, okay, you said this, or let's talk about that. And then, sometimes it's kind of fun because I'll find I call them Easter eggs, but basically someone will put something in the book that's just fun. Like one woman said her husband wants to live to the age of 200 and she doesn't. And so at some point in the interview, I just said, I'm rooting for your husband to make it to 200. Another woman, well, she had eating disorders and she blames her mom for it. And so she spent like a first third of a book just all over her mother, like just all over. And then she wrote one sentence that said, there was this one time that we were at the zoo, my mother wrestled a kid away from the gorilla. The kid got too close to the cage and my mother wrestled the kid away from a gorilla. One sentence. And so I get into the interview, I start and I say, okay, I said, I have a lot of questions I want to get into, but first you got to tell me about your mother and the gorilla. And at the end of the interview, when I got off the interview, she's like, I didn't think anybody would ever even read that sentence. She's like, I wrote that. She said, I didn't think anybody would ever read that sentence. And, but so it makes it fun because most people that are writing books, a lot of people are writing books, unless they're a doctor or scientist, they're talking about themselves. They're talking about family. They're talking about reality. The others, the doctors, well, they get into the science and it gets nerdy. And I like that too, but I like it from the perspective of being able to take something that seems really complex on the inside and then turning it around and saying, how do I explain this to someone who doesn't understand what all this stuff is? And so, the fancy words all aside, what is going on in the muscle? What's going on in your body? Why is this working that way? I like being able to take that information and simplify it to where I don't consider myself brilliant, but I figure if I can't understand this, then nobody will. So I want to say, how do I make it smart? How do I make it dumb enough for me? To talk to me like I'm a third grader, okay? And so that's what I do as I take those interviews and I try to get out really good, valuable things that people can do just based on what this book is about, or what the science says. And so I get some really interesting guests. It's across everything, anything that will affect the health and fitness of someone over 40. So I've done shows on eczema. I've had shows on shingles. I've had some very big guests. You may remember P90X back in the 90s. Tony Horton's been on my show a couple times. Denise Austin, remember her doing the aerobics class stuff on Lifetime and on ESPN. She's been on the podcast, and a lot of other notable people in the space. So we're talking about everything from mobility to strength to food to this and that. And so what it's allowed me to do is to say, well, okay, vegans will say vegan is the best way to eat. Well, is that true? Well, carnivores say the same thing. And Mediterranean diet people say the same thing. I'm like, okay, so what are they actually saying? Well, they're saying they don't eat junk. They eat real food. They eat whole food. And whether they want to say, I only eat the plant-based kind, or I only eat the animal-based kind, or, I avoid certain things like seed oils. They're eating whole food is what they're doing. They're all doing that. And they're saying, we don't eat junk, and they eat junk. So they look at a carnivore person or a keto person and say, they're just eating bacon. They live on bacon. No, that's not true. They also eat organ meats, and they eat steak, and they eat chicken, and they eat other stuff. But you can believe that they're eating junk, but it's not how it works. So, I'm able to pull all this different information together and say, okay, here's what this means for you. And so that's why I really like doing the podcast. I would probably read most of those books and pay for them, but they send them to me for free, and then I read them and they come on the podcast. And so it's kind of fun to have those conversations, especially when I get someone who's so smart. They're like some I can't even get where their head is, but they're so smart they don't know how smart they are, and they just wrote this book. Like there was the woman this woman worked for NASA. And her job was to study bone density in astronauts so they could help the astronauts with their bone density. So this woman knew more about bone density than any human on this earth. The woman that won the Nobel Prize for the Nobel Prize for figuring out what telomeres were and the length and how they worked. Again, thinks at such a huge high level. It's just, I'm taking that information and trying to make it so someone else understands what this means for them so they can make better decisions based on what's from us. That's why when you brought up Ozempic, I've had people on, a guy who actually prescribed Ozempic. This is business. Whole business is formed around this thing. It's an industry. And I asked them the question. I said, look, someone comes to you and they're going to do Ozempic. What are you going to do for them to keep them from getting frail? And he said, well, we have some literature and we talked to him, but the short answer was nothing. And so I got up after the call was over. I said, well, look, if you've got people coming into your clinic and they need a trainer, I wouldn't mind working out a referral process with you because these folks need to be doing resistance training and getting adequate protein. And if they're not prioritizing protein and they're not eating enough, they're not getting enough protein. So they're losing muscle hand over fist. I said, you're going to take old people that are obese and you're just going to turn them into old, frail people who are less obese. So yeah, I have an opinion.
All right, folks. So that is a great place to go and learn more about what Allan talks about. I mean, man, I have to tell you, very, very in-depth information. I really do appreciate everything that you shared with us today, because it's eye-opening. It becomes, there's no doubt that when you get to a certain age, and especially depending on what your status, whether you're working for someone else or whether you're working for yourself like I do and have a couple of businesses, time is precious, right? Time is very precious. It becomes your greatest commodity, as it were. It also becomes your most precious commodity, is your time. What are you going to spend it doing? And it's unfortunate that in many cases we choose to give it to someone else instead of give it to ourselves. And when we do that, we allow ourselves to not make good decisions on our health in many, many cases. And I certainly, I know that there's plenty of times my wife and I both have on our calendar, we're walking at this time, and then a client or a potential client needs that time instead. And that's where that time goes. It's not a hard, fast rule, unfortunately. And that does ourselves a disservice. There's no doubt about it.
That's that co-pilot I was talking about. You gotta set some boundaries, and you gotta make some rules, and you gotta put Harlan first. He's your best employee. Take care of the guy.
I don't know about that. I think if you talk to my team, there may be some discussion about that.
Yeah, there might be. Okay.
But no, I do appreciate everything you had to say, because it really does. It's a conversation that my wife and I need to have together to put those priorities back where they're supposed to be, because we spend all day telling people some of the same things that you did without doing them ourselves. We tell them, don't get dependent on these GLP-1s, on Ozempic. If you're not going to commit to these other things, you don't want to go down that pathway. And I'm not saying we're not interested in getting on those medications, but we're not doing some of the other things that we're telling people they need to do too. So, it's very hypocritical at the end of the day to not be doing the things that if you got on this show today, Allan, and all those things that you said that people should be doing, you were doing none of them, then you're nothing really but a hypocrite at that point in time, right? You have given up all of your other things, and I truly think you burned the ships to do these things. And I have no doubt that you're doing those yourself, or in some of those cases, as you move from where you were to where you are, you did them already to get to the place where you are. But it also gives you the opportunity to say the things that you did about your uncle who was 80 years old and what you think his life could have been like if he would have made other decisions. And so I really do appreciate your candor in those situations as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm just a big believer that we have agency over ourselves when we let ourselves have agency.
Yeah.
And if we don't do the right things for ourselves, well, then we don't get it. And I can't tell you how many times that I could, because even the folks that are wanting this Ozempic, they're not willing to invest. They want somebody else to pay for it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's why they want the other plan.
That's
and
true.
I get on a lot of calls and I'm talking to someone like, so are you ready to invest in your health and fitness? And I'm like, no, not really. I'm like, okay, then you don't want it. It's okay. It's okay to not want it. It's your life. It's your choices. My stepfather had a heart attack and died at 47. So there's that path. There's the path you're aging down. You can choose to just let it slide and go, or you can choose to do something about it. And that's why, again, I love the human body, because it's capable of healing. It's capable of improving itself. You just have to give it what it needs. And yeah, that's going to require an investment of time, of effort, and probably money.
Yeah.
So, if you're willing to make the investment, there's a huge payoff in the end.
Yeah, It really is. I mean, how much is your health? How much investment is that worth? And
All of it. All of it.
it really is. But it's not to everyone, right? You just said
Right.
that it's not to everyone. And unfortunately, most of the time when someone who has just absolutely ignored all of those things, they get to a point where it's almost impossible to come back from, or in some cases, impossible to come back from, because they suffered that catastrophic type thing. They've had congestive heart failure, or they've had something tremendously terrible happen to them that have now put them in a situation where they may never physically recover to the point where they could have, even if they had taken action a year or 2 years before that.
Yeah. But regardless of their age, you can get healthier. You can get more fit. You just got to start doing the right thing. And when you do, your body will respond again. It's a wonderful gift, and we shouldn't take it for granted the way we do.
No, you're right. It makes me think about it. I just talked about the situation with congestive heart failure or heart attacks or things. How many times have you seen someone that you've never seen before? In fact, in my neighborhood, you probably don't have quite this in the island. You'll see someone that you know has lived in this neighborhood, and now all of a sudden you see them walking. And it's usually because something has happened, right? They've either been diagnosed with diabetes or heart condition, or something's going on to where now their doctor, because you can look at them and tell this is a new thing. You know, and in many cases they're doing what you just said. I just seen them walk around because we live in a neighborhood that's just a big circle type thing here. I seen them come around one time, and then in a couple of weeks you see them, oh, here they come around a second time, right?
Well,
there's probably something that's happened in their life that has forced them to do this. But why do we make that happen, right? Why do we let it get to that point before we take action?
well, again, because the value of the change has to outplay the cost of the change, and the cost just seems so significant until the value is whether you live or die.
Yeah, and that all of a sudden, the big stick, as we talked about before we started, the carrot and the stick. And you're going to die if you don't do this. That's a big damn stick, brother. That's a big damn stick.
Exactly. And but again, there's the carrot is still there. You know, like if my grandfather had been able to play one more year of golf, what was that worth to him? You know, I can't even tell you how much that finishing that Tough Mudder with my daughter was worth. It was one of the most precious moments of my life.
Right.
Doing that.
And you probably didn't even realize what it was going to mean. I mean, you had an idea, but even in your mind, you probably didn't have a picture of, and at the end, we'll be holding hands if we go across the finish line, right? That wasn't in your mind. You just wanted to finish with her. And then when that happened, man, you talk about the cherry on top, brother. Woo!
Well, there was a story right before then, and I've got just a minute, and I'll tell it.
Go ahead.
So one of the last obstacles, not the last obstacle, one of the last obstacles was electric. They had these electrodes hanging down, so whole curtains of them, and you were running through a mud puddle that had ruts in it. And so you had to be very careful with your steps. You couldn't just run straight through. And if that electric current hit you, because we came up on it, I saw this guy get hit, and he went face first in the mud, and I think my instinct just tried to jump back up and got hit again and went down again. So you got about 20 or 30 guys kind of standing here in a clump that just watched this happen, and they look petrified. They're like, oh my God, look what just happened to that dude. And so we're coming up on the group. My daughter's like, what do you want to do? I said, go around them. And she said, what do you mean? I said, you just go around the left. I'm going to go around the right. We'll meet on the other side of them. She's like, okay. So she did. She went around. I went around. And we came back together, and I grabbed her hand. And then we ran all the way through that thing. Now, you could still feel them hitting you. There was still powerful, but we ran all the way through. And so the grabbing her hand, because I also have an associate's in physics, was displacement of the electricity across two bodies instead of one.
Yeah.
And that's what allowed us to run through there. And so, we ran through, and I don't know if the other guys behind me realized that the easiest way was for a bunch of them to just grab hold of each other and go through together. I don't know if they saw that and understood that, but that's how I got us through that obstacle just as quickly as we did. And then, we both jumped over the water, over the fire thing, because that's just a photo op. It's not really a scary fire thing. But you jump over that for the photo op, and then I grabbed her hand and we went through the finish line. And so there was never a plan to grab hands until I realized that's how we're going to get through this obstacle. And I didn't want to hold her hand when we jumped over the fire, but I did want to finish with her. So I held her hand. And, that is just, again, it's a magic moment. And if you go to my website and you go to my about page at 40plusfitness.com, you're going to see a picture of me at the beach the day that day after I did the volleyball almost die thing. And then you're going to see a picture of me at the Tough Mudder after we finished with my daughter. I clipped her out of that particular photo, but you'll see that photo. Both of them are in there, and you'll see the fundamental difference in the human being that's there, and the joy that's on my face the day of the Tough Mudder versus who you're looking at when I was going through my worst period. So I am a very different human being for doing this. And that's the payoff. That's the payoff. Even if you're not near death yet, there's a payoff. It's a huge payoff. And that's what I want to help people do.
Awesome. Man, I commend you on your journey, and definitely to where you have been and where you're going to, and the message that you're bringing out there, brother. That's really impressive. And definitely I commend you on that, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Allan.
All right, folks, it is 40plusfitness.com. That is the number 40 plus PLUS fitness.com. You can also go take that quiz that Allan was talking about earlier. And I'm sure there's access to your podcast from that website as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. There's a link right on the top. Take you right over to the podcast. There's also a link to the book if you're a reader. And there's an audio version of it. If you like podcasts, and which obviously you're listening to this, you like podcasts. I did an audio version of the book, me reading. It's the first time I ever did anything like that, so that was an interesting experience. But I figured I'm a podcaster. I have to at least narrate my own book, right?
Right. Why would I pay someone else to read whenever I talk all the time? Why not do it? All right, Allan, thank you so much for being on the show, buddy. I really appreciate it. Man, I wish you all the success in the future. Folks, don't forget to go and check out Allan at 40plusfitness.com. It is always a joy to have someone on that is super supportive of your health and the mission all of us have is to help one another on this earth and just be better people overall. Being a healthy, better you is always super important. Thanks again, Allan.
Thank you, Harlan.
All right, folks, that wraps up this episode of the Health and Wealth Power Hour. Don't forget the other program that we do monthly is Why Does Healthcare Suck? That's right. Why does healthcare suck? We talk about all the different crazy things in the U.S. healthcare system, including, as Allan mentioned earlier, the crazy rates you have to pay on those premiums for health insurance. And you ain't even got any healthcare yet. You're just paying for health insurance. We talk about that, plus many other things. Lots of cool guests come on, including nurses, physicians, and others that have dealt with this healthcare system, giving you tips and tricks on how to avoid the different crazy pitfalls and barricades and blockades and barriers to the U.S. healthcare system. Catch us monthly on that across multiple different avenues. We do it on LinkedIn. We have it on, all those different things. YouTube, Instagram, all of those. But best place to find me is on LinkedIn itself, and connect with me, and then you get notifications on all that. Thanks again for being with us. We'll catch you next time on the Health and Wealth Power Hour. We are out of here.